Hello. There are many historic sites or buildings that frequently go into the Chinese poetry. Sometimes they make the poems famous, and sometimes it's the other way around. The poems make these historic sites better known. And often it's a bit of both. The sites and poems help each other into more popularity. We've already seen quite a few of them. For example, the 黄鹤楼. We have 宋孟浩然之广陵 by 李白. 故人西辞黄鹤楼，烟花三月下扬州. And 鹳雀楼, we have 登鹳雀楼 by 王之涣，欲穷千里目，更上一层楼. We just learned 题西陵壁 by 苏轼, and now know 西陵 is a name of a temple, 西陵寺, 西陵 temple, in the scenic Lushan. Today we will look at a poem that features another temple, which has become extremely famous because of this poem. It is a Tang Shi from the Tang dynasty, and it's another 七言绝句. The author is Zhang Ji, who was about 10-15 years younger than Li Bai. So far, we have largely seen big poets, and big in the sense that they were famous and influential, and they wrote so many amazing poems. It's really difficult to pick which ones we should learn first, and how many more we should or need to learn to be able to have a glimpse of what these poets have achieved. For example, Li Bai, or Du Fu, or Bai Juyi, or Wang Wei, Wang Changling, etc. Zhang Ji, on the other hand, is not such a poet. In fact, nowadays, Zhang Ji is still being remembered, probably purely on this single poem that we are learning today. But this is such a remarkable poem, capturing so fully the sentiment that the poet tried to convey at the time, and creating such an enchanting feel that for thousands of years people have been drawn to it, and it is definitely among the best of the Tang poems. The title of the poem is 枫桥夜泊. The location where this poem was written is in the city of Suzhou, which will be revealed in the poem. Suzhou is a city not far from Shanghai, only about 50-60 miles away. So this is Shanghai and this is Suzhou. And this is Beijing, the capital, and this is Xi'an or Chang'an when the poem was written, the capital of the Tang dynasty. Suzhou is full of waterways in the city and around, small rivers, streams, etc. And because of this, there are many old bridges and boats in the city, which gave it a nickname, Venice of the East. It's really a lovely place to visit. Feng is maple tree, and qiao is bridge. It's worth mentioning that Feng Qiao, in fact, was not the name of the bridge when this poem was written. The poet just saw some maple trees and a bridge, and decided to call this Feng Qiao, which was meant to mean a bridge with maple trees around. However, due to this very poem, when the poem became so widely known, that bridge was identified and then even renamed as Feng Qiao. So if you go to Suzhou today, you will find Feng Qiao, but it wasn't called Feng Qiao when Zhang Ji wrote this poem. Another example of how influential literature could be. Ye is night, and the bo is to dock. We've seen this character before, this bo in Du Fu's 绝句, the last line, 门泊东吴万里船, if you still remember. So the title is saying, at night, the poet docked near a bridge where there were some maple trees. Let's read the poem first. 月落乌啼霜满天，江枫渔火对愁眠。姑苏城外寒山寺，夜半钟声到客船。月 is the moon, 落 is to drop, and here means the moon to set. 乌 is crow, 乌鸦. Ti is birds calling or chirping. 霜 is frost, 满 is full of, and 天 is sky. So the first line is describing a dark and chilly autumn night, setting the tone for the whole poem. The moon has set, the crow is calling, and the sky and air is full of cold frost. We can see that this line is actually very busy. Just 7 characters. It talks about the moon, the crow, the frost, and to a certain extent the sky, all very compact, but feels intense and full of impact. It could not be mistaken that the mood of this poem is dark and heavy. Which leads to the second line, 江枫渔火对愁眠, channeling this dark mood to the poet's own personal feeling. 江 is river, so 江枫 is the maple trees on the riverbanks. 渔, if you look at the right-hand part, it's also 鱼, meaning fish. With this radical 三点水, it means fishing or fisherman. 火 is fire, but here means the light or the lamp on the fishing boat. 对 is to face, to be together with. 愁 is worry and sadness. 眠 is to sleep. We've seen this word before. 春眠不觉晓. So the poet could see the red maple trees on the riverbank and the light of the lamps on fishing boats, and he was sleeping while facing all the worry and sadness in his heart. We really need to walk into the scene described by the poet and really take our time to focus on the language and imagine that the scene is in front of our eyes to appreciate its elegance and beauty. We know the surroundings were dark and cold. Even the color of the bird was dark, the crow. And now within this darkness, we have the red color, the maples, and the flame of the light. You know, in modern photoshopped photography or painting, there is one style that all the backgrounds are rendered gray or black and white, and only the subject matter intended to be emphasized is highlighted in certain color, often red, to create a very impactful effect. We see that Zhang Ji was using this method 1300 years ago already. And what did he want to emphasize about? About his sadness, 愁. And what was he sad about? He did not specify. Now, if our understanding of these 2 lines stopped here, and we haven't lost much, it's really the mood and sentiment embedded in the beautiful words that is mostly charming and memorable. But it would still be interesting and fulfilling to dig a bit deeper, wouldn't it? In fact, there are a lot of clues in the poem to help us. Some, we need to understand certain background information, but for some others, we could well guess. First, from the title, 枫桥夜泊, it's kind of obvious that the poet was traveling. While he traveled, probably alone, a cold and dark night could well bring about his thoughts of missing home, and that's why he was sad. And second, this poem was written after the disastrous Anshi Rebellion, or Anshi 之乱, the defining years when the prosperous and powerful Tang dynasty started to go downhill. So the poet, as someone employed by the state, as someone like any literate people whose sole meaning of life is to serve the emperor, to serve the state, and to serve the people, was full of sadness for what he realized was a catastrophic effect the wars had on the Tang Empire. That's where this intense sadness is from. And thirdly, 江枫 is in fact a very common subject to signal the feeling of sadness in the Chinese poetry tradition. It has its roots in much earlier poetry, and since that ancient time, people have almost always associated 江枫 with sadness and gloom. So whenever you see this 江枫 reference, or anything that is similar in essence, you should know straight away that this is about something dismal and bleak. This is yet another example of the Chinese cultural symbol hidden in the poetry. Now that the poet has used an extremely contrasting visual to show his heavy heart, what else could be added to bring this subject even further and deeper? Zhang Ji masterfully jumped out of the picture he just created and instead turned to what the ears could hear. It had to be a dead silent night, apart from the shriek of the crow. But then he could hear the long-lasting, rich and resonant sound of bells struck from a temple outside the Suzhou city. Gusu is one old name of Suzhou. Cheng is city. Wai is outside. Hanshan, literally cold mountain. But here is the name of a temple, Hanshan Si. And Si is temple. This is what Hanshan Si looked like. As I said earlier, this temple has since become way more renowned thanks to this poem. You can see this Han Shan Si written at the front. I'll explain the last two lines together because they really are one single full sentence. Ban is middle, halfway. So 夜半 is midnight. 钟 is bell. 声 is sound. 到 is to reach. 客 is guest. And 船 is boat. So from the Hanshan temple outside Suzhou at midnight, the sounds of bells being struck reached my guest boat. The poet called himself a guest in the Suzhou city, so his boat was also a guest boat. Now let's close our eyes again and imagine this. The poet was already very sad. The night scene around him, the darkness, the cold, the maple, the crow, all added to his sadness. And he obviously couldn't fall asleep easily. And now he heard the sounds of bells from far away. Did it help him to sleep? No, not at all. It probably made it worse. But on the other hand, such sounds of bells must be rich, solemn, and majestic. This bong, bong, bong. So could in fact help to soothe the poet, to bring some calmness and peace in his heart. And we shouldn't forget that this sound comes from a bell in a temple, a Buddhism temple. So by nature, it should have certain effect of calming down people and bringing about the inner peace from within. So while the whole poem is mainly about an unhappy traveler, his sleepless night, and his growing gloom, in the end, he did not really fall into deep misery, but had that sparkle of hope and positiveness. Apart from the bell, there was also a flame, this 渔火, also usually associated with hope. The author's deep and true sadness was certainly without any doubt, but it was so beautiful and never too pessimistic. For me, I think this rich and almost unspeakable effect is what has pushed this poem to a new height. There are so many fine details, those elements which must be dug deep to find and fully appreciate. And thanks to this wonderful poem, the name of Zhang Ji could now be forever remembered by us. That's all. Thank you.